Hi, I'm Glenn Kleiman, Executive Director of the Friday Institute for Educational Innovation at the College of Education at North Carolina State University. The Friday Institute's goal is to help schools invent their futures, to help them prepare their students for the world in which they'll live. We believe that we're in a period of historical change in education. So much of what we have in our schools now were great innovations 100 years ago, when we were forming comprehensive high schools in the United States to provide education for many more students, and inventing things like the Carnegie units for seat time, like the bell schedules. The model really was the assembly line then. We are now in the process of reinventing schools for the digital information age. Our work really focuses on preparing schools for the digital information age, schools for the digital information age that will prepare students. And one of the key aspects of the Friday Institute is that we really work systemically across the major areas that have to be addressed for these changes. So our work involves working on the technology infrastructure, in particular for the state of North Carolina, but beginning to work elsewhere also. Works on issues of leadership development for schools at the school and district level. We work on teacher development. We work on changes in the culture of teaching and learning. And we also contribute to reforming state policy to enable the state and the schools within it to move forward with the necessary changes. Let me give a few examples that also will exemplify the kinds of principles we work from. So for example, we deeply believe that changes in schools involve both building the technology infrastructure, but also the human infrastructure. And we find actually the challenges of building the human infrastructure are far more complex than the technology one. So some of our work, for example, looks at leadership development. I always go back to my old friend Betty Manchester, who led the work in Maine around the digital learning initiatives. And I did an interview with Betty years ago, and I asked Betty, what makes it work some places and not others? And she said, Glenn, there are three things: leadership, leadership, and leadership. So this focus on developing school, district, and state leadership is critical to our work. We, for example, work with the Principals Association in North Carolina to run a program called Distinguished Leaders in Practice for Digital Learning, preparing principals to be their school leaders around digital learning initiatives. That program is a year-long program. It blends both face-to-face and online activities, has a coaching model, and brings together some of the critical elements of professional development for school leaders. We also, for example, are running several what we call MOOCs for educators. When this whole idea of MOOCs came along, we really thought, well, this technique may be important because in education we have such a critical need for large-scale professional development that's accessible to educators no matter where they might be, no matter what schedule they might have available. And we thought that the MOOC techniques were much more suitable for educated, experienced professionals who knew what they were looking for. So we began a program beginning with a MOOC-Ed for the digital learning transition, primarily aimed at school and district leaders and leadership teams to help them learn about all of the elements of a successful transition in the school. Some of that focuses on changing the culture of teaching and learning, which we think is very important. Some of it focuses on establishing a vision. Some focuses on engaging the community, which is another essential part of a successful digital learning initiative. And we also, of course, look at things like professional development, funding, responsible use policies, all of the elements that need to be brought together. And one of the key messages throughout that work is that this has to be about changing education and teaching and learning, changing the roles of teachers and students, changing what's learned, how it's learned, who does what in the classroom, opening up the flexibility, going beyond the school walls, going beyond the school day, going into many more things of providing many more ways to personalize education. So each student can learn in ways that work for them at a pace that works for them, rather than what I said at the beginning, moving away from the industrial age assembly line model where every student does the same thing, moving with a group. So we're really going from mass production to mass personalization or customization in education. So in addition to the leadership and professional development work, we're very involved in helping build the technology infrastructure. So the Friday Institute leads what's called the North Carolina K-12 Cloud Computing Program, which is building a statewide infrastructure to provide cloud-based technology and software as a service, really aimed at reducing the burden of all of the local districts to provide both the technology infrastructure and the support systems, and also to allow for things like statewide purchasing, statewide programs for things like email, and will also facilitate statewide professional development. We also work directly with many of the school districts, providing professional development, technical assistance around a planning model for the digital learning conversion. In all of this work, our deep commitment is helping schools prepare the students for the world in which they'll live, the digital information age, and to prepare them not just for college and careers, but also to be informed citizens, remembering that the original purpose of public education in this country was to develop an informed citizenry, which is so essential for a democratic society to function successfully.